The fourth call that shift said her father had collapsed. It was a lie. Again. Listen, K-fam. Eudora Celeste is 24. A nurse on a private cardiac ward, blue scrubs, curls tied back, hands steady over strangers' hearts. But her own phone won't stop buzzing. Her mother, Rochelle, invents an emergency. Then another. Then she calls the hospital director and whispers that Eudora is unstable, that she hides a dangerous man, IU, and that man, Han Jun-suk, Korean, 34. They call him the Quiet One. A koi fish inked up the left side of his neck, a charcoal suit with no tie, a plain steel watch that costs more than her month, 2 worlds that should never touch, a nurse who protects everyone, a man the city is afraid of. She tells him the truth. She gives him one rule. Look into the threat against my job. Nothing more. Do not touch my family. So his man starts watching, quiet, careful, and the search history that surfaces makes his blood go cold. Funeral homes. And one question typed over and over. Omo. But what Jun-suk pieces together in that data? Nobody was supposed to see it yet. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The phone lit up for the 4th time in 90 minutes, and Eudora already knew the shape of the lie before she read it. She was standing at the medication cart on the private cardiac wing, blue scrub top damp at the spine, a paper cup of pills in one gloved hand. Bed 7 was waiting. Mr. Halloran, 81, post-valve replacement, a man who counted every beat of his own heart out loud. She set the cup down on the tray. She peeled the glove halfway, then she flipped the phone. Dad collapsed, not breathing right. Come now, all caps. No punctuation past that hard period. The same 3-word engine every time. Her thumb hovered. Her pulse did the thing it always did. A quick, hard climb, and she hated her own body for still believing it. 4 calls tonight. A voicemail at 6. A text at 7:40. Another at 8:15. And now this, at 9:05, when she was 1 room away from clocking a patient who actually could stop breathing. She stepped back from the cart. She looked left. Priya was 2 doors down, charting under the fluorescents, teal scrubs, low bun, and she caught Eudora's face across the corridor and mouthed one word. Her? Eudora nodded once. She pressed call. She turned into the supply alcove, back to the hall, and cupped the phone tight to her jaw so the ward wouldn't hear. It rang twice. Her mother picked up on a laugh, not a sob. A laugh, the tail end of one, cut short when she remembered the script. Eudora. Oh, thank God. Your father. Where is he right now? He went gray, baby. He was on the floor. I couldn't. Mama, put him on. A pause. In the pause, Eudora heard it. A television. The low, warm mumble of a courtroom show. A studio audience. A gavel. Her father's own recliner had that show on every weeknight at 9, and under the TV, closer to the phone, she heard him. Elijah, turning a page. The soft, dry crackle of newspaper folded into quarters, the sound she'd fallen asleep to for 18 years. He's resting now, her mother said, voice dropping into something gentler, something rehearsed. He came around, but you scared me, Eudora. I thought I lost him. And where were you? You were at that hospital. I'm at work. I'm always at work when you do this. Do what? The gentleness snapped like a twig. Do what, exactly? Eudora closed her eyes. Behind the lids, she saw the whole apartment, the plum blouse, the reading glasses on the beaded chain. Her mother standing in the kitchen doorway with a cardigan clutched at her own throat like she was cold in her own warm home, and Elijah in the front room, alive, unbothered, turning his newspaper, one page every 90 seconds, the sound of a man who had not collapsed and did not know he was supposed to have. "I can hear the TV," Eudora said. "I can hear him with the paper." Silence. A television laughed. Then her mother said, "So you'd rather he actually die, so you'd learn." The line went dead. Eudora stayed where she was. Shelves of saline, boxes of gauze, a bin of gloves in 3 sizes. She counted the boxes because counting gave her hands somewhere to be. 12, 13. The number didn't matter. The counting mattered. She'd learned it at 19, in a bathroom, the first time her mother's voice had opened a hole in the floor under her. You count something real until the fake thing lets go of your throat. The fake thing let go. It always did. It just took longer every year. She peeled her mind off the sound of the newspaper. That was the detail that would ride home with her tonight. She knew already. Not the words, the paper. Her father, folded into his recliner, folding his news into quarters, the way he'd done her whole life. So alive he was bored. So fine he had the volume up on a courtroom show. And her mother, 6 feet away from him, holding a phone to her own mouth and telling their daughter he had gone gray on the floor. You had to be a certain kind of person to do that with the man right there in the room, to use his living body as a prop for his dying one. Eudora had spent years trying to name that kind of person and had given up. There wasn't a word clean enough. There was only the plum blouse and the beaded chain and the smile that arrived the second anyone else walked in. Eudora stood in the supply alcove, holding a black rectangle against her cheek. Down the hall, a monitor chimed. Someone's heart, asking for her. She came out of the alcove and her hands were steady, because she made them be. That was the trick. You do not carry it into the room. You leave it at the door with your coat. She regloved. She lifted the cup off the tray and walked into bed 7 and said, "Evening, Mr. Halloran. Let's get these in you." And she smiled the smile that had nothing behind it and everything under it. The old man was propped up on 3 pillows, a magazine open and unread on his chest, and he watched her hands the way he watched everything, like he could feel his own repaired heart timing itself against her calm. "You're late by 4 minutes," he said. "I am. I apologize." "Don't apologize. Tell me what happened." His eyes were sharp under the papery lids. "Something happened. You've got a face on you. My wife had that face." Eudora tipped the cup into his palm. "Family," she said. It was the only true word she'd give the room. "Ah." He nodded slowly, as if that explained the entire history of the world, which perhaps it did. Family's the one thing they don't put on the chart. He counted his pills like heartbeats. 1, 2, 3, and took them with a sip of water, and then he said, watching her, "Whoever it is, don't let them do it during your shift. People in here need your hands not shaking." "My hands aren't shaking." "They're not," he agreed, surprised. "Good girl, that's a discipline." She checked his line, killed the overhead, left the door cracked the width he liked. In the hall she stood a second with her back to his room and let his words settle, because he was right, and because he'd said out loud the exact contract she lived by. Don't let them do it during your shift. She'd built a wall around this hospital for that reason. The trouble was, the woman on the other side of that wall had just, tonight, started walking its length, looking for the gate. By the time she'd charted him and killed the light, Priya was waiting by the linen cart with 2 cups of the terrible break-room coffee. "Fourth one?" Priya said. "Fourth one." What was it this time? He collapsed, not breathing. Eudora took the cup. He was reading the paper. I heard the pages. Priya didn't gasp. That was why Eudora loved her. Priya just tilted her head and did the math out loud, in a low, flat voice. "So she's escalated the story. Last month it was chest pains. Before that, it was the diabetes. Now it's collapse, not breathing. She's raising the stakes because the lower ones stopped moving you. They never moved me. They moved your hands. Priya nodded at Eudora's cup. It was shaking, a fine tremor riding the black surface into rings. Eudora set it on the cart. They move my body, she admitted. Not my feet. I don't go. You used to go. I used to go. 2 years of going. That was the part nobody outside this hallway understood. Every fake emergency in the beginning had been a real sprint. A cab across the city at midnight, a run up 4 flights, a burst through the door with her heart in her mouth, to find her father alive at the table doing a crossword, and her mother saying, "Oh, false alarm, but as long as you're here, sit and stay, and why do you have to work nights? And that hospital doesn't love you like family loves you, and when are you going to give this up and come home?" Come home. That was the destination under every lie. Not the father on the floor, the daughter back in the apartment, under her roof, under her chain, under her thumb. Eudora had figured out the machine slowly, the way you figure out you're being poisoned, one strange meal at a time. Now she saw the whole mechanism. Every call was a hook baited with her father's body, and her mother reeled, and each time Eudora didn't come, the hook got bigger. "You want to hear the worst part?" Eudora said. "He knows, Dad. He knows she does it, and he lets her, because arguing with her costs more than she's worth to argue with. So he sits in that chair and reads his paper and lets his own heart get used as a starting pistol. Every week. And he says nothing." "That's not silence to protect her," Priya said. "That's a man who ran out of road a long time ago. I know. You ever think about getting him out?" Eudora had thought about it 1,000 times. Her father in the passenger seat, the beaded chain, and the plum blouse shrinking in the mirror. But you couldn't rescue a man who folded his newspaper into quarters and called it peace. "He won't go," she said. "She's got 40 years of him. I've got a couch you keep offering me, and a car with a full tank. It's not a fair fight for his loyalty." Priya didn't argue. She just bumped her shoulder against Eudora's, once, the way she did. "You should block her," Priya said. "I can't block her." "Why not?" "Because one day the paper won't crackle." Eudora looked at her. "One day it'll be real, and I'll have blocked the number, and I'll never forgive myself, and she knows it. That's the whole trick. She poisoned the alarm so I can't ever turn it off." Priya went quiet. Down the corridor, the night charge nurse called Eudora's name. She wiped her face with the flat of her hand, though nothing was on it, and answered, "Coming." The rest of the shift ran clean. 2 admissions, 1 discharge, a blood draw on a hard stick that took her 3 tries, and an apology. She loved this. And that was the thing she could never say at home, because at home love was a currency you owed your mother and no one else. She loved the private cardiac wing, loved the hush of it, the money hush, the families who tipped their whole grief into your hands and trusted you to hold it. This job had a waiting list a mile long. She'd gotten it at 23 off the strength of a reference and a spotless record. Diane Whitfield, director of nursing, had told her in the interview, in that cool, clipped way, "We hire quiet excellence here. We do not hire drama." And Eudora had said, "Then you've hired the right person," and meant it like a vow. Quiet. That was the word she'd built her whole adult life around. Quiet job. Quiet apartment, 40 minutes from her mother. And the quietest thing of all, the thing she guarded like a live coal cupped in both hands, the man nobody knew about. She thought about him now, at 1 a.m., in the locker room, changing out of the blue scrubs into jeans and the cream sweater and her white sneakers, gold hoops going back into her ears. She didn't have a photo of him on her phone. She'd deleted the one she'd taken because she didn't trust her own phone, didn't trust the cloud. didn't trust anything with a screen after growing up watched. What she had instead was a standing arrangement, a bench in a park near the water. Thursday nights he wasn't traveling. He never asked her to explain her mother. He only listened, with those heavy-lidded eyes that didn't move much and missed nothing. And once, only once, he had said the thing that undid her. You don't owe someone the truth just because they made you. She had told him that once, on the bench, in November, when the cold came off the water and she'd finally cracked, and told him about the running years, the midnight cabs, the 4 flights of stairs, the crossword, and the false alarm, and the sit and stay. He'd listened the whole way through without a single question, and when she finished, he'd been quiet for so long she thought she'd frightened him off, the way the real ones always got frightened off. Then he'd said the sentence, "You don't owe someone the truth just because they made you," and something in her chest that had been clenched since she was 17 had loosened one notch, just one, and she'd had to look at the water so he wouldn't see her face come apart. She hadn't told him her mother's name. She hadn't told him anything that could be used. She wasn't a fool. He was. Complicated. She knew that much, the way you know the ocean is deep without measuring it. Han Jun-suk wore charcoal suits with no tie and the top button open, and there was ink climbing the left side of his neck, a fish rising out of his collar, black scales you could just see the top of, and men moved out of his way in restaurants without being asked. She had not asked what he did. She'd decided, early, that she'd rather have the quiet of him than the answer. 2 secrets, then. The job that would drop her the second she brought instability through its glass doors. And the man who, if her mother ever learned he existed, would become the newest, biggest hook. Because that was the other thing about her mother. Rochelle didn't just want her home. Rochelle wanted her alone. A daughter with a life was a daughter with an exit. And every relationship Eudora had ever tried to build, from the time she was 17, had died the same death. A phone call to the boy's family, a whisper campaign, a tearful performance of a mother only trying to protect my baby from someone unstable. Rochelle had a genius for the word unstable. She could hang it on anyone. She'd hung it on Eudora's first serious boyfriend, on a college roommate, once, memorably, on a landlord. It always came dressed as concern. It always came with an audience. She remembered the landlord clearest, because it was the one that had finally taught her the shape of the thing. Eudora had been 20, renting a room in a house owned by a widowed man named Mr. Osei, kind, gray, harmless. Her mother had visited once, decided the arrangement made her look like a mother who couldn't keep her own daughter home, and inside a week, Mr. Osei had a woman on his phone weeping that her unstable child had fixated on him and he should protect himself. He'd asked Eudora to leave, apologetic, shaken. A good man handed a poison, and no way to test it. That was the genius of the word. Unstable didn't have to be proven. It only had to be planted. Once it was in the soil, everyone around you started watering it, just by being careful of you. Eudora zipped her bag. She had never once, in all of it, let her mother find a target big enough to matter. She'd kept her life small on purpose, small and quiet and hers. She didn't yet know that the smallness was over, that the woman in the plum blouse had already grown bored of aiming at Eudora's father's chest, and had started, that very week, to look around for something bigger to point at. Priya walked her out to the parking structure, bangles clicking, denim jacket over her scrubs. "Come stay at mine this weekend," Priya said. "Get out of that apartment 40 minutes of nothing. My couch misses you." "I'm fine. You said one day the paper won't crackle like you'd rehearsed it. People don't rehearse a line unless it lives in them." Eudora stopped at her car. Overhead, a light buzzed and flickered. "You know what she said tonight?" Before she hung up, she looked at Priya over the roof of the car. "She said she'd rather he actually die, so I'd learn." Priya's face didn't move for a second. Then, softly, learn what? To come home. Eudora opened the door. That's the whole curriculum. Everything she does. It's one lesson. Come home. You're not going to. No. Say it like you mean it. Eudora looked at her friend across the dark car, and the fluorescent buzzed, and somewhere below them a gate ground open for a leaving car. I'm not going home, she said. Not for a call, not for a text, not for a body on the floor, unless I see it with my own 2 eyes. She used up my running. There's none left. Priya nodded slowly. Okay, she said. Okay, Thursday then. Your bench guy? Eudora almost smiled. Thursday, my bench guy. You gonna tell me his name yet? When it's real. It's been 8 months. When it's real, Eudora said again, and got in the car, and drove the 40 quiet minutes home, with the radio off, checking the mirror twice out of a habit she'd never named, past the exit that led to her mother's block, not taking it, hands steady on the wheel, because she made them be. Her phone buzzed once on the passenger seat at a red light. She glanced. A voicemail, left while she drove, from a number saved in her contacts as Mama, in letters she'd never had the heart to change to anything colder. She let it sit there, glowing, unopened, all the way home. She'd learn what was in it soon enough, she always did. What she didn't hear yet, what she wouldn't hear for 3 more days, was that this particular voicemail wasn't for her at all. It was a rehearsal. Her mother, sitting in the lamplight with the beaded chain around her neck and the courtroom show finally off, had discovered that aiming at the daughter's heart had stopped working, and a woman like that does not stop. She only turns the barrel. Eudora pulled into her space, cut the engine, sat a moment in the dark with both hands in her lap, breathing, the way she taught patients to breathe before a needle, in through the nose, out slow, leave it at the door. Then she picked up the phone, and instead of the voicemail, she opened the one thread she trusted and typed 3 words to the only person who had never once used her father's body as bait. Rough night. You up? The dots appeared almost at once. Then a single line, no punctuation missing, no drama, no hook. Always. Same bench Thursday. Sleep now. She held the phone to her chest for a second like it was warm. Then she went inside, into the small, quiet apartment that was entirely her own, and she did not yet understand that the quiet was the last quiet she'd get for a long time. Somewhere across the city, in a lamplit kitchen, a woman in a plum blouse opened her laptop and began, patiently, in her tidy, watchful way, to type a hospital's name into a search bar. The search bar took the hospital's name in under a minute. Rochelle typed it the way she did everything. Slow, deliberate, no wasted keystroke. She found the main line. She found the department directory. She found the words. Nursing Administration. And she wrote them on the back of an envelope in her tidy schoolteacher hand, and she underlined them twice. Then she closed the laptop and went to bed, because a good performance needs rest. 3 days passed like water. Eudora worked 2 doubles and slept between them. She sat on the bench Thursday night and said nothing about the voicemail she still hadn't opened, and Junsuk didn't ask, and the water moved black and easy in front of them, and for 2 hours, the machine that lived in her phone stayed quiet. She let herself believe the quiet meant something. It didn't. It meant her mother had moved on to a bigger target. The call came into the administrative wing on a Monday, 10:40 in the morning, while Eudora was 4 floors up, starting an IV on a woman in bed 12. Rochelle asked for the director of nursing by name. She had the name off a staff page. She used her warm voice, the audience voice, the one that made strangers lean in. I need to speak to someone about one of your nurses, she said. It's a matter of patient safety. I wouldn't call otherwise. I'm not that kind of person. Diane Whitfield took the call at her desk. Charcoal blazer, rimless glasses, a pen already in her hand, because Diane was always holding a pen. She pulled a legal pad toward her, the way she'd been trained to 20 years ago. When someone says, "Patient safety," you write. "Go ahead," Diane said. "It's my daughter." A pause, engineered, a small, wet breath. "Eudora Celeste. She works on your cardiac floor, and I love her. You understand. A mother calls because she loves her child." Diane's pen stopped. "You're a family member. I'm her mother." "Ma'am, I can't discuss an employee with—" "You don't have to discuss. You have to. Listen." The warmth held, but underneath it, something clicked into a harder gear. "She's not well. She hasn't been well for a long time. She hides it. Oh, she's good at hiding it. She was always the clever one. But the pressure builds, and it comes out. She stops sleeping. She stops answering. She disappears for days." Diane wrote none of it. Her pen hovered. She'd worked with Eudora Celeste for a year. She had watched those hands run a line into a collapsing vein at 3 a.m. without a tremor. "And there's a man." Rochelle let the word sit. "I don't know everything. A mother never does. But I know he's dangerous. I know he's the kind of man you don't ask questions about. She won't say his name. She won't bring him home. What does that tell you? A girl who won't say the name? Ma'am, I'm telling you she is unstable. And she is bringing a dangerous man into contact with your patients. And if something happens," the voice broke, right on cue, a beautiful clean break. "I called. Remember that I called. I did my part." The line went dead before Diane could answer. Diane sat with the pen in her hand and the legal pad blank in front of her. She looked at the empty page for a long moment. Then she wrote one word, small, in the corner. "Mother." And under it, smaller, "No report." Because a nurse who couldn't be smeared didn't need defending, and a director who'd hired for quiet excellence knew the difference between a red flag and a red herring. But she'd have to say something. That was the poison of it. You can't unhear the words. Dangerous man. And your patience. In the same sentence. Policy is policy. Diane capped her pen. She found Eudora in the medroom at 12:15, counting a controlled dose into her palm. 1, 2, 3. Diane waited until the pills were signed off and locked before she spoke. "Walk with me a second." Eudora's stomach dropped before a single sentence landed. She knew the walk. Everyone on a floor knows the walk with me. She followed Diane down the corridor, past the family lounge, into the small office with the door that closed, and she watched Diane sit and fold her hands and choose her words, and she already knew. She knew the way you know a fever is coming, an hour before it breaks. "We got a call this morning," Diane said, "about you." Eudora's face did nothing. Inside, everything fell. "A woman said she was your mother." What did she say? Not a question. The same flat register her whole body went into when the phone lit up Mama. Diane looked at her over the rimless glasses. She was not a cruel woman. She was a careful one, which is different and sometimes worse. That you're unstable. That there's a man she considers dangerous. That she was worried for the patients. A beat. "I want to be clear. I didn't file anything. I'm not going to. In my judgment, there's nothing here. The relief should have come. It didn't. Because Diane wasn't finished. And the but was already forming in the air. But she has the number now. And people who make these calls make them again. So I have to document that a concern was raised and reviewed and dismissed. That protects you. And I have to ask you, once, on the record, Diane's pen touched the pad. Is there anything about your personal situation that could ever walk through those doors and become this hospital's problem? There it was. The exact wound her mother had aimed for, drawn now from the mouth of the one person in the world Eudora had built her whole quiet life to impress. We do not hire drama. The interview came back whole, every word, the way it had lived in her like a vow for a year. No, Eudora said. You're certain. There is nothing about my life, Eudora said, and each word came out level and spaced and load-bearing, that will ever walk through those doors. Diane held her eyes for 3 seconds, then she nodded and wrote a single line and turned the pad face down, which was its own small mercy. Good, then it's handled. Go back to your floor. Eudora stood, her legs worked. She thanked her supervisor in a voice that belonged to someone calmer, and she walked back down the corridor she'd walked 1,000 times, and somewhere around the family lounge, the floor stopped feeling solid under her sneakers. She finished the shift. Of course she finished the shift. She started 2 more lines and titrated a drip, and laughed at something a patient's grandson said, and none of her patients would ever have guessed that the woman adjusting their oxygen had just watched the one clean room in her life get a crack driven straight down the middle of it. The hands held. She made the hands hold. Mr. Halloran's voice was in her ear the whole time. People in here need your hands not shaking. And she borrowed it like a splint. But in the stairwell, between the 4th floor and the 3rd, alone, she stopped. She put her back against the cinder block. She slid down until she was sitting on the cold step, and she took out her phone and she stared at it, at the little icon with the number 1 on it, the voicemail she'd been carrying unopened, like a stone in a pocket for 4 days, and she understood, completely, all at once, no more pretending, that the phone calls to her had only ever been the rehearsal. This was the show. Her mother had aimed past her heart and hit her life. She did not cry. She'd learned a long time ago that crying in a hospital stairwell got you found. She counted the steps below her instead. 11 down to the landing, 11 back up, 11, 11, until her breath came back into her own control. Then she did something she had never once done in 8 months on that bench. She called him. Not Thursday, not a text. She pressed the name she'd never given Diane, never given Priya, never given anyone, and she put the phone to her ear in the stairwell and she waited 2 rings. Eudora. His voice, when it came, had the flat calm she'd built a shelter out of, but something in how he said her name told her he already knew this wasn't an ordinary hour. You're not on a bench. No. Where are you? Stairwell, work. Her voice cracked on the 2nd word, and she hated it and let it happen anyway. Jun-suk, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to all of it before you say anything. Can you do that? A pause on his end. She heard, faintly, a door close, a room go quiet, the sound of a man clearing everyone else out of it. I'm listening. So she told him. She told him the thing she'd been protecting him from for 8 months, not because she'd been ashamed of him, but because she'd been ashamed of her, of the machine she came from. She told him about the 4 calls that one night and the years before it. She told him about Dad collapsed, and the paper crackling in the background, alive. She told him her mother's name for the first time out loud to him. Rochelle. She said it, and it tasted like a key turning. She told him about the word unstable. And the landlord who'd folded years ago, and the boyfriends who'd folded, and the whole long history of a woman who wanted her daughter alone so badly she'd burn the ground to get there. And then she told him about Diane, about the call to the hospital, about dangerous man, and your patience, and the face-down legal pad, and the one clean room with the crack down the middle. Junseok said nothing for a long time. She could hear him breathing. She'd learned to read his silences on that bench, and this one was not the empty kind. This one had weight moving inside it, gears she'd chosen for 8 months not to look at. She used the hospital, he said finally. Not a question, getting the shape of it exactly right on the first pass, the way he did. She used the hospital because you protected it, because it's the one thing she couldn't reach through you, so she went around you. Eudora shut her eyes against the cinder block. That was it. That was the whole ugly geometry of it. And he'd found it in 9 seconds. And something in her chest loosened, just to have another human being see the trap she'd been living inside as clearly as she saw it herself. Yes, she said. Then it stops being a family matter, Junseok said. The second it walks into your workplace. You understand the difference. She does too. She just bet you'd be too loyal to name it. I don't want... She stopped. Started again, careful, because this was the part that mattered. This was the line she'd promised herself she'd draw if she ever let the two halves of her life touch. I'm not calling you to make something happen to my mother. I need you to hear that. I don't know exactly what you do. I've never asked. But I know it isn't nothing, and I know men who, I know that whatever you'd offer, some of it I can't take. Tell me what you can take, no offense in it, no wounded pride, just a man narrowing the field to what she was actually asking for. She breathed. 11 steps down, 11 up. The threat to the hospital, that's it. If she's going to keep calling that building, calling Diane, trying to get me pulled, I want to know it's coming before it lands. I want to see it before Diane does. I want... Her voice steadied into something she recognized as her own. I want to stop being ambushed, that's all. Find out what she's actually doing, whether she's going to do it again, what she's planning. Nobody touches her. Nobody goes to that house. You don't go near my father. You look, you find out, you tell me. And I decide what happens next. Me. The silence again. Weighing. You're setting the terms, he said. I'm setting the terms. Most people who call me, Junseok said slowly, and for the first time, she heard something under the calm that might have been the ghost of respect. Call, because they want the terms taken off their hands. You're the first one who ever called to keep them. Then that's your answer. Her back straightened against the wall. Look, don't touch. Report to me. Family is mine to handle. You handle the part that comes for my job. Those are the only walls, and if you can't work inside them, tell me now, and we hang up, and I go back to my floor, and I handle all of it alone, like I always have. I can work inside them. No hesitation. I have a man, careful. He watches. He doesn't move. Nobody will ever know he was there. Not your mother, not your father, not your director. He finds out what she's actually doing, and everything comes to you first. You decide, every step. I don't act on anything without your word. A pause. That's the arrangement you're asking for. Say it back so I know we agree. She almost laughed, in the stairwell, at the pure lawyerly cleanness of a mob boss reading her a contract she'd written herself. You watch, you don't act. Everything comes to me. I decide. Everything comes to you. You decide, he repeated, sealing it. It's done. She sat there another second, with the phone warm against her ear and the cinder block cold against her spine, and she realized her hands had gone completely still. Not braced still, the way she made them at work. Still on their own. She looked at them like they belonged to someone else. Eudora, his voice dropped. Off the contract now, back onto the bench where they lived. You should have told me 8 months ago. I know. Not so I could do anything, so you wouldn't have carried it alone for 8 months. She didn't have an answer for that one, so she gave him the truth instead. It's real now, she said. You asked me once when it would be real. It's real now. You're in it. I'm in it, he said. She heard him move. A chair, a coat, a decision. Go home. Not the stairwell. Home. Sleep if you can. Nothing happens tonight except a man starts to watch, and you don't have to do anything at all. She stood up off the step. Her knees popped. 4 floors above her, a monitor was beeping for someone, and her shift was technically over, and the world went on needing her hands. She wiped her face once, though nothing had actually fallen, and she straightened the badge on her chest, and she started up the 11 steps to the 4th floor to sign out. Jun Suk. Still here. Whatever your man finds. She stopped on the landing. You tell me even if it's bad. Especially if it's bad. Don't protect me from it. That's the one thing I won't forgive. Don't decide what I can hear. The pause on his end was different this time. Longer. She'd remember it later, when it mattered. When there was a park bench, and a phone screen, and a folded newspaper, and a truth he'd sat on, because she'd tied his hands with her own 2 words. Don't touch, don't go near my father. She'd remember that she made him promise transparency in the same breath she built the wall that would make it impossible. But she couldn't know that yet. Nobody could. So all she heard was him say, low and even, I'll tell you what I find. And across the city, in a house with the newspaper folded into perfect quarters, and a laptop closed on a kitchen table, Rochelle Celeste slept the clean sleep of a woman who believed she'd finally found the one wall her daughter would never climb over, and had no idea, none at all, that someone had just started, very quietly, to watch her back. Baek Do-yoon parked the black sedan 2 doors down from the house with the folded newspaper and the closed laptop, killed the engine, and did nothing at all. That was the whole job. Jun-suk had said it twice. Slow, the way you say a thing to a man who already understands it. Watch, report, touch nothing. So Baek watched, and the first thing he learned about Rochelle Celeste was that she rose at 6 and turned on every light in the house before the sun was up, room by room, like a woman making sure an audience could see her even when nobody was there. He did not follow her into the world. He let the world tell him where she went. A grocery run on Tuesday. A pharmacy on Wednesday for a prescription that was not hers. Elijah's blood pressure. Refilled on time, paid in cash. Church envelope in the mailbox by the door. On the surface, a respectable woman in a deep plum blouse living a small, tidy life. Baek wrote none of it as a verdict. He wrote it as a list, and he sent the list to Jun-suk every night at 11. Plain sentences, no adjectives, the way his boss preferred a thing delivered. Jun-suk read each list once in a dark room, and filed it. 3 nights in, the list said almost nothing. A woman, a house, a husband who never left it. And that absence was its own information. Eudora had described a mother who moved mountains to reach her daughter across a 40-minute drive, 4 fake emergencies in a single night. And here was that same woman going quiet, sitting still, waiting. People did not go quiet because they had given up. They went quiet because they had started building something that needed both hands. There was a rhythm to the house that Baek mapped without meaning to, the way any watcher eventually learns the song of a place. Lights at 6. Coffee steam on the kitchen glass by 6:20. The husband's shape crossing the front window once, slow, and then not again for hours. Rochelle out to the porch to sweep a step that was already clean, because a swept step is a thing the neighbors can see. She waved at a woman across the street, with a smile back-clocked, as a performance, the second the neighbor turned away, the mouth dropping the shape the moment its audience was gone. He noted it. He did not judge it. Judging was Jun-suk's floor to stand on, and above that, Eudora's. And Baek had spent a career keeping his own opinions in his own pockets, alongside his hands. But he noted, too, that the husband never drove. The car in the drive was hers. When the pharmacy needed a run, she made it. When the mail needed carrying, she carried it. Elijah Celeste crossed the front window and folded his paper and existed inside that house like furniture that breathed. And Beck, 4 days in, could not have told you the sound of the man's voice. He wrote that down as well, in his plain hand, because a man who is never allowed to leave a house is a man who cannot contradict what is said about him outside it. And Beck had lived long enough among careful, ruinous people to know that a silenced man is not an accident. He is a resource. Eudora called Junsuk Thursday night from her car, not the bench. "Anything," she said. Not hello. 8 months of hellos, and now she skipped them, because the thing between them had a job now, and the job did not have time for hellos. "She bought groceries," Junsuk said. "She refilled your father's medicine. She hasn't called the hospital again." "That's it?" "That's it." He heard her breathe out, and he heard the breath catch halfway, because she knew what he knew, without either of them saying it. Rochelle going silent after a strike was not peace. It was the pause a person takes to reload. "You'd tell me," Eudora said. "If it were more, I'd tell you what I find." He said it the same way he'd said it the first time, and she let it hold her the way it had before, and neither of them named the small, cold fact sitting underneath, that a promise to report is only as clean as the thing you find, and some things, once found, cannot be unsaid to the person you love. On the 4th day, the list changed. Beck was not a man who guessed. He watched Rochelle carry the recycling to the curb, and among the flattened cereal boxes and the church bulletins, there was a printout, folded once, and the fold had been made carelessly, the way a person folds paper they no longer care about, because the thing on it is already done. He did not touch it while she stood there. He waited until the porch light went dark and the house went to sleep, and then he walked past the curb one time, unhurried, a man out for air, and he read what the streetlight let him read before it went into his coat. It was a price sheet, from a funeral home. 3 tiers of service, the middle one circled in pen. He photographed it flat on the seat of the sedan, and sent the photograph to Junsuk at 11, with 4 words. She priced a funeral. Junsuk looked at that photograph for a long time. A funeral had a name. Someone had to be dead, or planned to be, for a woman to sit at a counter and choose the middle tier. Nobody in that house was sick. Elijah's pressure medicine had just been refilled. Beck's own list, 3 days back, in his own plain sentences. You did not refill a dying man's prescription and price his casket in the same week. Unless the casket was never meant to hold anyone at all. He did not send Eudora the photograph that night. He told himself it was because one page proved nothing, and that was true, and it was also the first small door he closed on the promise he'd made, quietly, telling himself the door was only pulled to, not shut. But he told Beck to keep looking. Not the curb, he said. The searches. If she's writing to funeral homes, she's typing other things too. Find out what a woman types when she's building this. Beck was patient in the specific way expensive men are patient. He did not break into the house. He did not need to. Rochelle Celeste was proud of her own competence and careless with the machine that held it. And there are men who can stand close to a careless machine and let it hand them its history without ever laying a finger on the door. It took him 2 days. On the second night, the list Junsuk received was not a list. It was a screen capture, and under it, Beck had written 1 sentence, and even Beck, flat, scarred, a man who wrote everything without weather, had let a single word slip that he did not usually use. Boss, this is bad. Junsuk read the searches in the order she had typed them. The first was ordinary, almost tender. Funeral home near me, cost of a simple service. the kind of thing a daughter might type for a parent who was actually failing. But the dates ran backward across 2 weeks, and the searches climbed, and the climb was the story. How long can a body be held before burial? What documents does a family need to bury someone quickly? Can a burial happen without all family present? And then, near the top, the most recent, typed at 2 a.m. into a lit kitchen, while a husband slept upstairs, and a black sedan sat 2 doors down, that she never once looked for. How to tell someone at their workplace that a family member has died. How to inform a nurse on shift that her father passed. Jun-suk set the phone down. He did not stand. He did not curse. He held very still, the way he held still before every irreversible thing in his life. And in that stillness, he understood the whole shape of it at once. The way you understand a chessboard is already lost 3 moves before the board agrees. Rochelle was not grieving. Rochelle was not afraid. Rochelle was rehearsing. She had tried the daughter's heart 4 times in one night, and the heart had learned to hear the newspaper crackle behind the lie. She had tried the daughter's job and hit a wall named Diane Whitfield, who did not open the file. So now she was building the one message the daughter could not fact-check from a stairwell. A death. Not a collapse this time. Not chest pain. The end. The thing you cannot call the house to disprove, because if it were true, calling the house would only make it worse. She was pricing the casket she would never buy, and studying how to deliver a death she would never permit, so that when the words landed on Eudora mid-shift, they would carry the weight of paperwork behind them. He looked at the phrase again. How to inform a nurse on shift that her father passed. She was going to send it to Eudora at work. On purpose. At the exact place the girl had sworn nothing from her life would ever walk through the doors. And he could do nothing. That was the wall Jun-suk stood against now, and it was a wall he had built himself, in a stairwell, out of the sound of Eudora's voice. Nobody touches my mother. Nobody goes to the house. You don't go near my father. Watch, don't act. Everything comes to me, I decide. He had agreed to every word. He had agreed because it was the first time in 8 months she'd handed him a piece of her weight, instead of carrying it alone. And a man does not fumble the first thing the woman he loves finally trusts him to hold. But she had handed him something else in the same breath, standing on that stair, and the 2 things did not fit in the same hand. Don't decide what I can hear. Tell me everything, especially if it's bad. Tell her everything. Touch nothing. Go near no one. He turned the 2 commands over and they cut in opposite directions, because to obey the second was to sit still while a woman built a false grave for a living man and aimed it at the person he'd sworn to protect. And to obey the first was to hand Eudora a horror she could not yet do anything with except carry, at work, on shift, with pills to count and a supervisor already watching her for cracks. The next morning, Eudora worked a floor that had no idea what sat 2 days deep in a black sedan's phone. She counted a dose for Mr. Halloran, 1, 2, 3, and signed it, and her hands were steady, and she was proud of that steadiness, the way a person is proud of a thing that cost them something to build. Diane Whitfield passed the medroom once, glanced in, clipboard flat to her chest, and said only, "Morning," and moved on. But the glance lasted a half-second longer than a morning needed, and Eudora felt it land and stay. The file might say, "Concern reviewed and dismissed." The eyes said reviewing still. Priya caught her at the coffee cart on their 30. "You look like you slept," she said, which from Priya was both a compliment and a question. "I did. And bench guy?" Eudora almost said it then. The whole shape of the last 2 weeks, the call to Diane, the man who was now, somewhere, watching her mother instead of the other way around. She'd carried it alone so long that the carrying had become a muscle she flexed without noticing. But she looked at Priya's quick, warm face, and she thought of Jun-suk's voice, low and even, saying he'd tell her what he found, and she decided, the way you decide 100 small things that later turn out to be the whole story, to wait until there was something to tell. "He's good," she said. "It's handled." It was the exact phrase Diane had used to close the file. Eudora didn't hear the echo. 2 rooms of her life, both being told the same soft lie by people who believed it, that a thing was handled when the thing had only just begun to move. Across the city, Beck called Jun-suk at midnight, which he never did. "You want me to stop it," he said. Not a question. A soldier offering a door. "Stop it how? The mother has a car. Cars have problems. She stays home a week. She can't drive anywhere. She can't mail anything." A pause. "Or I take the machine. No machine. No searches. No message. Clean." It would have been so easy. That was the poison of it. How easy. A dead battery. A lost laptop. A woman inconvenienced into silence, and none of it traceable to a park bench or a Korean surname. Eudora would never know a thing had been prevented, because you cannot see the emergency that never arrives. "No," Jun-suk said. "Boss." She said, "Watch. We watch." He stood now, finally, and walked to the window that looked at nothing, a habit older than this problem. "The day I decide what she gets to survive without asking her, I'm the mother. Just quieter." Bake was silent a moment. "Then you tell her what's coming." And there it was, the second wall, waiting where the first one ended. Jun-suk pressed his thumb to the edge of the phone. Because he had promised to tell her, and he was already, right now, not telling her. Had sat on the funeral sheet for 2 days, calling it caution. If he called her tonight and read her those searches, he would be handing her a loaded thing with no trigger. She would know her mother was building a fake death, and she would still have to walk onto the cardiac floor tomorrow and count Mr. Halloran's morning dose, with that knowledge sitting in her chest. 1, 2, 3, and she would not be able to stop it, or prove it, or do a single thing but wait for the blow to fall on the mother's schedule instead of her own. Knowing early would not save her. It would only lengthen the fall, and under that, a smaller, meaner truth he did not like looking at. He was not certain. 2 weeks of searches and a circled price were a pattern, not a confession. A grieving daughter and a scheming one typed some of the same words into the same box at 2 a.m. If he told Eudora her mother was faking her father's death and he was wrong, if some part of this was real, if Elijah's heart chose this month of all months to actually fail, then he would have poisoned the girl against her own family with a theory, and he would be no better than Rochelle, whispering unstable into a phone. He read the searches a 3rd time, slower, forcing himself to look for the innocent version. He was a man who had stayed alive for years by refusing to believe the first ugly story a thing told him. Maybe a frightened daughter, genuinely convinced her father was slipping, had sat up nights teaching herself the machinery of a death she dreaded. Maybe the circled price was grief practicing its own choreography, the way people plan for a thing precisely because they cannot bear it. He wanted that version to hold. He turned it over in both hands and looked for the seam. He found it in the last line. How to inform a nurse on shift that her father passed. A frightened daughter did not research how to break a death to another daughter. There was only one nurse in this family, and she was not the one typing. A grieving woman planned a funeral. A calculating one planned the phone call, planned the delivery, the timing, the exact wording that would land hardest on a specific person at her most defenseless hour. You did not rehearse how to tell someone unless the telling was the point. The death was set dressing. The wound was the message, and the message had a target, and the target counted pills 3 floors up in a private cardiac ward every morning at 8. That was the seam, and it did not hold. And Jun-suk let the innocent version go the way you let go of a thing you already knew you'd have to. He needed the thing under the pattern. He needed to know, with his own eyes, that Elijah Celeste was alive and would stay alive, before he put a single word of this into Eudora's ears. He looked at the phrase one last time. How to inform a nurse on shift that her father passed. There was a way to be certain. It sat 2 doors from a black sedan, in a brown corduroy jacket, folding a newspaper into quarters. A man June-suk had sworn to Eudora he would never go near. Do nothing more tonight, he told Baewek. Keep the sedan, keep your hands in your pockets, and find out one thing for me by morning. He watched his own reflection over the dead city. When does the husband leave the house alone? He doesn't, mostly. June-suk ended the call. He did not call Eudora. He told himself it was for one more day, only one, until he was sure. And that was the 3rd small door, and this one he heard click shut, and he did not pretend it was only pulled to. Across the city, in her car in a parking lot she hadn't meant to stop in, Eudora sat with her phone dark in her lap, and the 4-day voicemail still unopened above a newer one she hadn't noticed arrive. She'd called for news, and gotten groceries, and refilled medicine, and she should have felt lighter, and she did not. Her mother had gone quiet, and she had grown up inside that quiet enough times to know its temperature. Silence from Rochelle was not the absence of a thing, it was the indrawn breath before it. She started the car. Thursday's bench, the man who never asked her to explain, the voice that said, "I'll tell you what I find," and made it sound like a floor she could stand on. She believed him, that was the part she'd have to live with later, that she believed him completely, and he was, at that very hour, in a dark room across the city, deciding exactly how much of what he'd found she was strong enough to hold. And on a kitchen table under a single lamp, Rochelle Celeste closed the laptop, squared the funeral sheet she'd fished back out of the recycling, and slid it into an envelope she did not seal. She held it under the lamp a moment, turning it so the circled tear caught the light, and something moved across her face that was almost tenderness, not for the man it named, but for the plan itself, the clean elegance of it. She wrote no address on it. She wouldn't need to mail it. The paper wasn't the weapon. The paper was the rehearsal. The weapon was 3 sentences long, and she already had it word for word, and she was only waiting now, the way patient, ruinous people wait, for the exact shift, the exact hour, the exact moment her daughter's hands were fullest, to press send. June-suk waited until the streetlight 2 doors down flickered off, and then he made the one call he had promised himself he would not make until he had seen it with his own eyes. He did not call Eudora. He called Bake. "The pharmacy," he said. "Wednesday. You said she pays cash for the pressure medicine." "Which pharmacy?" Beck gave him the name, the cross street, the hour Rochelle usually came and went. June-suk wrote none of it down. He held the phone against his jaw and looked out the window at nothing and let the whole ugly shape of it settle in his chest one more time before he moved. He had a theory. A theory was not a fact. He had learned the difference in rooms far worse than this one, from men who died because somebody confused the two. So he went to see the fact. Morning came gray and low. June-suk stood across the street from the pharmacy in the charcoal suit, black overcoat, hands loose at his sides, and he watched the door the way he watched everything, without leaning, without checking his watch, a man who had all the time in the world because he had decided to have it. At 9:14, the sedan he already knew pulled to the curb. Rochelle got out, plum blouse under the beige cardigan, the beaded chain on her glasses catching the flat light, the church lady walk, chin up, the smile she wore for strangers already loaded on her face before there was a stranger to aim it at. And she was alone. That was the thing he needed. Not the medicine, the alone. She went in without a husband, without a wheelchair folded in the trunk, without the frantic body language of a woman whose man had collapsed 9 days ago, whose man was dying, whose man was being priced for a middle-tier casket. She went in the way a woman goes in to refill a healthy man's prescription. She came out 4 minutes later with a small white bag and got in her car and drove home to the house where that healthy man was sitting, alive, folding a newspaper into quarters. Junseok did not move for a long moment after her taillights were gone. Everything Beck had photographed was true, then. The funeral sheet with the middle tier circled, the searches climbing toward 2 in the morning, how to tell someone at their workplace, how to inform a nurse on shift that her father passed. It was all true, and none of it was grief, and now he had seen the proof standing on 2 feet, in a pharmacy parking lot, in a plum blouse. The father was alive. The mother was rehearsing his death. He should have felt the click of a solved thing. Instead, he felt the walls of Eudora's terms close around him like a hand. You watch. You don't act. Everything comes to me. I decide. And under it, tighter, nobody touches her. Nobody goes to the house. You don't go near my father. And under that, tightest of all, the thing she had made him promise, in the same breath she built the wall. Tell me what you find, especially if it's bad. Don't decide what I can hear. He stood in the cold with both orders pulling opposite directions in his 2 hands, and he understood, finally, why she had paused when she gave them to him, and why he had paused when he took them. She had asked him to be the one person who told her everything, and the one person who did nothing. Those 2 people were not the same man. He could not be both at once. Somewhere in the next few days, he was going to have to choose which promise to break. Not yet. He got in his own car. He drove. He did not drive to Eudora. Here is what he could have done, and what a lesser man would have done, and what Beck had already offered to do at midnight, with his flat, calm voice. End it clean. Kill the machine. Cut the power. Put the mother on a plane. Make the searches disappear. Make the funeral sheet a thing that never existed. Silence, delivered. Problem, solved. He had the men. He had the money. He had, God knew, the practice. He did not do it, and the reason was Eudora's face 8 months of Thursdays deep, and one sentence she had said on a bench near the water, without knowing she was drawing his boundaries for him. You don't owe someone the truth just because they made you. He had said it to her. He had meant it about her mother. He had not understood, until this week, that she would one day hand it back to him. As a rule, he had to live inside. If he decided what she could survive without asking her, he was the mother, just quieter. He had said that to Beck, and he had meant it, and he was going to have to keep meaning it even now, when meaning it cost more than a bullet would have. So he did the one thing left that broke no promise she had actually named, the loophole she had not thought to close, because she had never imagined the danger would need him to walk toward it so gently. She had said, "Don't go near my father," to keep the Mafia away from a fragile old man. She had meant, "Don't drag him into the dark." She had not meant, and could not have meant, "Don't sit next to him in the daylight like a person." Junseok decided to meet Elijah. Not to warn him, not to use him, not to pull him out of the house or turn him against his wife or hand him a folder of photographs and a theory that might still be wrong. He decided to meet the man for the plainest reason a careful person ever has. He needed to know, all the way down, that the father at the center of this was a real living person and not a name in Rochelle's script. He needed to look at Elijah and be certain, the way he was now certain about the pharmacy, that the man was alive and would stay alive, before he carried any of this to the woman he loved. Baek had said it already. The husband almost never leaves alone. Almost. Junseok did not want a snatch. He wanted a doorway. He found it in the smallest, most ordinary crack in Rochelle's total control. The church envelope. Beck's lists had it 3 weeks running. Rochelle drove to the church Thursday mornings to drop the envelope, and sit through the 10 o'clock service and the coffee after. 90 minutes. 2 hours some weeks. And on those mornings, and only those mornings, the house held a man alone with nobody to watch which chair he sat in. Jun-suk did not go to the house. That was the wall, and he kept it. He sent Baek to learn one more thing, the last thing, whether Elijah, in those 90 unwatched minutes, ever went as far as the mailbox, the porch, the small park at the end of the block where the old men from the row houses sat with their papers when the weather let them. Baek called back that night at 11, on schedule, flat as ever. 1 block, the little park. He walks to it slow, sits on the second bench, reads, goes home before she's back. He's done it twice while I've watched. Alone. Alone. Jun-suk closed his eyes for a second in the dark. Then I don't take him anywhere, he said. I sit down next to him, that's all. 2 men on a bench. If he wants to get up and go home, he gets up and goes home, and you never touched him, and I never touched him, and it never happened. And if he stays, Baek said, then he stays because he wants to. His choice. His feet. Jun-suk opened his eyes. I've broken enough of what she asked. I'm not breaking that. There was a pause on the line, the closest Baek ever came to a question. You're not telling her about this either. No. That's a lot of doors, boss. Jun-suk did not answer that, because it was true, and there was nothing in an answer that would make it less true. He was standing now behind a 4th closed door in a hallway of them, and he could hear how the count sounded from the outside, and he hated it, and he did it anyway. Every door he shut on Eudora, he shut for the same reason he refused to touch the mother, because the version of him that decided things for her, that managed her, that fed her the world in portions he judged she could hold, that man was the enemy, wearing his face. He would rather break the promise to tell her by a few days, and keep the promise to leave her the wheel, than the other way around. He told himself that was the smaller sin. He was not sure. He shut the door anyway. Thursday, 10 in the morning. The park was 4 benches, a dry fountain, 3 old men and their newspapers. Jun-suk came from the far side on foot, no car in sight. Baek nowhere a stranger would find him, and he walked the way you walk when you belong on a path, unhurried, and he sat down on the second bench beside a tall, stooped man in a brown corduroy jacket and a flat tweed cap, wire-frame glasses catching the gray sky, folding his newspaper into quarters with hands that moved slow and sure. For a while, Jun-suk said nothing. He let the man decide the bench still belonged to both of them. Elijah glanced once, the mild, tired glance of a man used to strangers, no alarm in it, and went back to his paper. That's a good crease, Jun-suk said finally. My grandfather folded his the same way, into quarters, said a whole newspaper was a rude thing to hold in public. Elijah's hands paused on the fold. Something moved behind the tired eyes, not fear, recognition of a kind. Company, maybe. My father taught me, he said. His voice was slower than his wife's, warmer, a little rusty, like a door not opened much, said the same. Rude to spread yourself out over a whole bench. He was right. He usually was. A small dry sound that in a less careful man would have been a laugh. Elijah went back to the fold, finished it, set the quartered paper on his knee. He did not ask who Jun-suk was. That, more than anything, told Jun-suk what a decade in that house had done to the man. He had stopped expecting the people who sat down beside him to have names he needed to know. They sat. The fountain was dry. One of the other old men turned a page. Jun-suk watched the father's hands and thought about how much a body tells you when the mouth has learned to stay shut. The slow way Elijah set the paper on his knee, squared to the edge, corrected a 1/4 inch. The way his shoulders sat forward, folded, apologizing for their own width. The watch with the cracked strap he had never once thought worth replacing. because a man who was not allowed to choose his own chair was not a man who bought himself new straps. Everything about him was a room somebody else had furnished. Junsuk had walked into 100 rooms in his life, reading them for the exit and the threat. This was the first time a man himself had been the room, and the threat was nowhere in it, and the exit was a church service a mile away that would end in 90 minutes. "You come here every week?" Junsuk asked. Light, a man making the nothing talk of benches. "When she's at church." It came out of Elijah plain and unguarded, and then his mouth closed a beat too late, the way a man's does when he hears his own life said out loud and understands how it sounds. "My wife," he added, quieter. "She likes me to rest, so I rest here, where she doesn't have to see me doing it wrong." Junsuk looked at the dry fountain and kept his face the way he kept it in every room, still, and inside him, something turned over cold and certain. There it was. Not a monster, a man who had folded himself into quarters so long he called it peace, sitting alone on a stolen 90 minutes, apologizing to a stranger for existing where his wife could not manage the exact shape of it. This was the man Rochelle was about to bury on paper. This warm, tired, silenced man, killed in a text message to his daughter so that the daughter would come running home to the house where the father sat alive and unallowed to drive. Junsuk had come to the park to confirm a life. He had confirmed a great deal more than that. "You have children?" Junsuk asked. Gentle. He already knew the answer. He needed to hear how the father said it. Elijah's whole slow body changed. Not much, a degree, but the tiredness lifted off one corner of him. "A daughter," he said. "Eudora." He said the name the way you say the one clean thing in a life. "She's a nurse, a good one, the best one." His thumb moved on the folded paper. "I don't see her the way I'd like. It's complicated, with her mother, but she's out there doing something that matters, keeping people's hearts going." A pause. "I keep the paper for her, you know. Silly. I fold it and I think, my girl's got steady hands. She gets that from—" He stopped. His jaw worked. "Well, not from her mother." Junsuk sat with that and did not touch it, did not push, did not let a single thread of the truth into the daylight between them. He had promised Eudora he would go near neither of these things, and he was already standing on the edge of both. He would not tip the father into it, not here. Not without her. Whatever he did next with what he now knew, this old man was not going to hear it first from a stranger on a bench. He had earned better than that, and Eudora had ordered it, and for once the promise and the decency pointed the same way. "She sounds like someone worth keeping the paper for," Junsuk said. "She is." Elijah looked at him then, really looked, and for a moment, the tired eyes sharpened behind the wire frames into something that had once been a whole man, before the house, before the plum blouse and the beaded chain, and the smile for audiences. "You've got somebody like that," he said. It was not a question. "You've got the look of a man carrying somebody." Junsuk held very still. "Careful with it," Elijah said, and turned the quartered paper over on his knee, and went back to reading, as if he had not just, with one worn sentence, seen straight through the charcoal suit to the thing underneath it. People who carry somebody quiet, the world likes to make you choose between the quiet and the carrying. Don't. He wet his thumb, turned a page. "I chose the quiet. Look where it sat me." The old man from the third bench folded his own paper and shuffled off. The fountain stayed dry. Somewhere a block over a church let out its 10 o'clock, and a car door somewhere started the countdown on Elijah's 90 minutes. "I should get back," Elijah said. He did not sound afraid. He sounded like a man reading a clock he had memorized. He gathered the newspaper, tucked it under his arm, and stood the slow way, one hand to the bench. He looked down at Junsuk with the mild kindness he seemed to have kept somewhere his wife had never found to take it. "You come next Thursday. There's usually a bench free," he said. "I like the company. Nobody sits with me anymore." "I might," Junsuk said, and meant it, and hated how much he meant it, because next Thursday was already going to be a different world than this one. He could feel the mother's 3 memorized sentences sitting somewhere in a house a mile away, loaded, waiting for the hour Eudora's hands were fullest. Elijah walked home slow, alive, a folded paper under his arm, in no danger from the man on the bench, and in terrible danger from the woman in the plum blouse, and having no idea which was which. Junsuk stayed on the second bench a long time after the father was gone. He had come to the park to be sure. He was sure now, sure the father was alive, sure the mother was rehearsing his death, sure the danger in this whole story had never once come from the world he lived in. No rival, no debt, no man with a scar and a gun, but from a kitchen table and a beaded eyeglass chain and a laptop open past 2 in the morning. The underworld was the safe part of Eudora's life. Her family was the ambush. And sure of one more thing, the one that sat coldest. He could not keep both promises much longer, because the searches had a direction: how to inform a nurse on shift. Rochelle was not going to mail the funeral sheet. The funeral sheet was the rehearsal. The weapon was 3 sentences aimed at a hospital hallway, and it would land on the one afternoon Eudora could not check the crackle of a newspaper to know it was a lie, because she would be at work, hands full of someone else's failing heart, when her phone told her that her father was already in the ground. Junsuk took out his phone. He looked at Eudora's name on the screen for a long moment in the gray light. His thumb rested over it, over the call that would break the wall, the call where he told her everything he had seen and learned and confirmed, the call she had ordered him to make. He did not make it, not because he had decided what she could survive, because he was one confirmation short, and one confirmed lie away from becoming the very thing he despised, and because if he called now with a theory dressed as a fact, he would poison a daughter against her family, on the strength of a browser history and a bench, and if he was wrong about even one thread, he would have done to Eudora exactly what Rochelle did, handed her a certainty she never got to check. So he needed the mother to move first. He needed the 3 sentences to actually leave the house. He needed the lie in Eudora's hands, where he could stand behind it with the truth in his, and prove it, in the same hour, with the father's living face, not a word, not a theory, a face. It was the coldest bet he had ever placed, and the person he was betting with was the one he had promised never to gamble. He put the phone away. He looked at the empty second bench where a silenced man had sat and called his cage peace. Then Junsuk stood, in the charcoal suit, and walked back the way he'd come, carrying a whole newspaper's worth of truth, folded into quarters in his chest, holding it in public, saying nothing, waiting for a mother to press send. Eudora had 4 beds humming, and a full cart, when the phone buzzed against her hip. She let it buzz. Bed 3 needed his second dose. Bed 7 wanted water he wasn't cleared for yet, and the new admission in 5 kept pulling at his line like it owed him money. She counted the tablets into the little paper cup. 1, 2, 3, signed the sheet. Her hands were steady, the way she'd trained them to be steady, the way Mr. Halloran had put a name to months ago. People in here need your hands, not shaking. The phone buzzed a second time, then a third, close together, the double tap of a text landing on top of a text. She capped the cart, wheeled it to the wall, wiped down. Only then did she pull the phone out, because that was the deal she'd made with herself a long time ago. The ward first, always the ward first. The family could wait behind the glass where it belonged. Mama? 2 messages, stacked. She thumbed the first one open with her thumb already braced for the script. Dad collapsed. Dad's not breathing right. Come home. 8 months of variations on the same 4 words, and she knew every key change by heart. This one didn't say, "Come home. Your father was buried yesterday." She read it. The hallway did that thing where it kept being a hallway. The fluorescents kept humming. The ice machine down by the break room kept dropping ice, and none of it matched the words on the glass. She read the second message. You weren't there. 3 words under the first 3. No exclamation point. No all caps. Her mother screamed in all caps when she wanted Eudora to run. This was lowercase. This was quiet. This was the voice her mother used at church. The warm one. The one that came out when there was an audience to convince. And Eudora understood, in one cold drop, that the audience this time was her. Buried. Yesterday. She stood very still in the middle of the ward, with her back to the wall, and she started to count. The med cart. 1. The rolling stool. 2. The hand sanitizer dispenser. The crash cart. The whiteboard with the bed numbers in blue marker. 3, 4, 5. She counted the way she'd counted boxes in a stockroom at 19, the way she'd counted 11 stairs down and 11 back up, the way she counted pills into cups 100 times a shift. Count the objects and the objects hold still, and if the objects hold still, then you hold still. The objects didn't hold still. The whiteboard blurred. She blinked, and it came back and blurred again, and she realized her eyes were wet, and she couldn't remember them going wet, and that scared her more than the message did, because her eyes did not do this on shift. Her eyes had a job. Buried yesterday. The paper. That was the thing that got in under the ribs. For 8 months the paper had crackled. Every phone call, every lie. There was Elijah in the background folding the newspaper into quarters. And that sound was the proof. That sound was the whole reason she never fully broke. Dad collapsed, and there behind it, the paper, alive, breathing, folding itself into peace. There was no paper in this message. You couldn't hear a text. And that was the trap. She saw it, and she fell in it at the same time. Her mother had finally found the one delivery Eudora couldn't check. Not a phone call she could listen through. Not a voice she could catch lying. A text, sent to a hallway, at the exact hour her daughter's hands were fullest, at the one place Eudora had sworn nothing from her life would ever cross. The dread she'd been carrying for weeks. The silence Jun-suk kept calling a breath before something. It had a shape now. This was the shape. Her knees knew before she did. She got herself off the wall and into the medroom, because the medroom had a door and the ward did not, and a nurse does not come apart where the patients can see the coming apart. She'd learned that the hard way at 19 too. She pushed through, and the door sighed shut behind her, and she made it as far as the low gurney they used to stage the medication trays, and she went down onto the edge of it like her strings had been cut. The clipboard on the counter slid. She didn't catch it. She put the phone face down on her knee and then turned it face up again because she needed to read it a 4th time, needed the words to be different this time, and they weren't. Your father was buried yesterday. You weren't there. Yesterday. Yesterday she had worked a double. Yesterday she had counted Mr. Halloran's dose at 7 in the morning with steady hands and told him good morning and meant it. Yesterday her father had been, where? In the ground? While she smiled at an 81-year-old and squared a corner of his blanket? Her mind did the math a daughter's mind does, the vicious itemized arithmetic of everywhere she'd been while the coffin went down, and every hour of it was a small betrayal she hadn't known she was committing. She hadn't called him in 9 days. That was the blade her mother had sharpened for years, and it went in exactly where it was built to go. 9 days. She'd been protecting her job. She'd been protecting a bench by the water on Thursday nights. She'd been protecting a secret, and she'd let 9 days go, and now the man who folded the paper into quarters and called it peace was gone, and the last thing she'd given him was silence. Her breath came wrong, short at the top, like the air stopped an inch before her lungs. She pressed the heel of her hand flat against her sternum, the way she'd tell a panicking patient to, and it didn't work on her, because knowing the trick and being rescued by the trick are two different mercies. The curls she'd tied back for the shift had been loosening for hours, and now half of them were down around her face, and she didn't push them back. Grief doesn't fix its hair. The door opened. "Hey, I needed the—" Priya stopped. Teal scrubs, the door still swinging off her hand. She read the whole room in a second, the way good nurses read rooms, and she let the door close behind her instead of in front of her. Eudora. Eudora tried to say it, and it came out as nothing, just breath, with a shape it couldn't hold. Priya crossed the room. She didn't reach for the phone. She went down onto her knees on the hard floor in front of the gurney, so she was under Eudora's face instead of over it, and she put both hands flat on Eudora's forearms. Warm, still. "Talk to me." "What?" Eudora turned the phone. Priya read it. Eudora watched her read it, watched her eyes go across the first line and drop to the second and come back up, and she watched something move in Priya's face that wasn't there a second ago. Not just the horror, something underneath the horror, tighter, but Eudora was too far under to name it, and it slid past her. "My dad," Eudora said. The word broke in the middle. She buried him, yesterday. She buried my father yesterday, and I was here. I was here counting pills. Breathe. I didn't call him. 9 days, Priya. 9 days, and he's in the ground, and I wasn't. Eudora, breathe, in, now." Priya squeezed her arms once, hard, a firm hand's trick of her own. "You're on the floor of a medroom hyperventilating, in through the nose. Do it, or I put you on the monitor myself." Eudora pulled the breath in. It caught, and stuttered, and made it. She let it out shaking. Again. She did it again. Her hands, the hands that never shook on shift, were shaking now, both of them, and she stared at them, like they belonged to someone she used to be. "I heard him," she said, quieter, wrecked. Every time she called, every single time she lied to me, he was there behind her folding the paper. That was how I knew. That was how I always knew she was lying. The paper. She looked up, and the fluorescence caught the wet on her face. "There's no paper in a text, Priya." She figured it out. She figured out the one way I couldn't tell. Priya's jaw did something. "Listen to me. He asked me to come home for years, and I never went. I thought if I went, I'd never get back out. I chose this. I chose the job I chose staying away, and I was right to. She'd have eaten me alive, but he's dead now, and being right doesn't." Her voice folded. "Being right doesn't put me at the funeral. You don't know that this is. I know my mother, flat. Certain." It was the certainty that scared Priya more than the tears. "You think she couldn't. You think a person couldn't. I know exactly what she could." And there it was, the years of it, laid bare on the gurney's edge, because the cruelty of the thing wasn't just the lie. The cruelty was that the lie fit. It fit into a lifetime of a mother who'd priced her own daughter's absence to the penny, who'd used the living body of a man as a prop for 8 months, who moved landlords and lovers off the board with one word. A mother like that made a daughter unable to be sure her father was alive. That was the wound under the wound. Rochelle had spent 24 years making certainty impossible, and then she'd sold Eudora the one thing certainty couldn't survive. "I need to call the house," Eudora said suddenly, and grabbed for the phone, and her thumb was already moving. If she'll answer. She wants me to call. That's the whole." Priya's hand closed over the phone, gentle, immovable. "Not like this," she said. "Not on the floor. You call that house right now. On this floor, with your hands like that, and whatever she says to you, you'll believe all of it. You know that. You taught me that. Don't hand her you like this. Eudora stared at her friend's hand over the phone. Some part of her, the nurse part, the part that had built a whole self out of never letting them see the hands shake, heard it, and knew it was true. But the daughter was louder tonight. I have to know, she whispered. Priya, I have to know if he's... Then we find out clean, Priya said. Not her voice. Not tonight. Not the one person in the world who wants you exactly this broken. The door pushed open again, and both of them flinched. Diane Whitfield. Charcoal blazer, the thin, rimless glasses, a clipboard in one hand and a pen already clicked. Cool gray eyes went from Priya kneeling on the floor to Eudora on the gurney edge with her hair down and her face wet, and something in the supervisor's composed face shifted by a single degree. Anand, Diane said. Even, cover her beds, now. Priya didn't move. Anand, the floor doesn't cover itself. Go. Priya looked at Eudora. Eudora managed the smallest nod, and Priya rose and squeezed her shoulder once on the way past, and said low, right against her ear, I'm 3 feet away. Do not call that house. Then she was gone, and the door closed, and it was Eudora and the woman who a year ago had told her, we hire quiet excellence, we do not hire drama. Eudora got to her feet. It cost her. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist, fast, the way you wipe before someone can log it, and she reached for the professional voice and found it in shreds. I'm sorry. Give me 5 minutes and I'll be back on the... Sit down. Eudora sat. Diane didn't come closer. She set the clipboard on the counter, face down. Eudora saw her do it, saw her deliberately not take a note, and that small mercy nearly undid what was left of her. Some weeks ago, Diane said, a woman called this ward, said she was your mother, said you were unstable, a beat. I documented it as a concern reviewed and dismissed, because in my judgment there was nothing there. Her gray eyes stayed level. Was I wrong? No. Eudora's voice scraped. No, you weren't wrong. Then tell me what's on your phone. Eudora's hand closed around it. 9 days of silence. A father in the ground. Her mother's lowercase voice. The whole thing she had sworn. There is nothing about my life that will ever walk through those doors. Collapsing right here, on the wrong side of the glass, because the family had found a way in through a text message. My father, she said. She couldn't make the next word small enough to survive saying, so she just turned the phone. Diane read it. Whatever it cost her, she didn't spend it on her face. She was quiet a moment. You believe it, Diane said. Not a question. The same certainty Priya had heard. The same certainty that a lifetime of a mother had built brick by brick. I believe she'd do it, Eudora said. I don't. I can't. The breath went short again. I don't know if it's true. That's what she did to me. I don't get to know. Diane picked the clipboard back up. She turned it over. She uncapped the pen. Then I'm making it the hospital's problem, she said, because it walked into my ward on shift, and that makes it mine. She wrote, fast, precise. You are off the floor as of now. Anand and I split your beds. This, she tapped the phone in Eudora's hand with one clean nail. The time it landed, the words, all of it. It's documented. If your mother is doing what I think a person capable of this is doing, she is building a case that you're unfit, and she is doing it through my hospital, and I will not have my hospital be her instrument. The pen stopped. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I'm not writing you up. I'm writing her down. Eudora looked at the woman who'd once made no drama sound like a commandment, and understood that the commandment had just changed shape into something that stood between her and her mother. Go somewhere that isn't this ward, Diane said, gentler, which from her was an earthquake. Call whoever you call when it's real, not the house. She capped the pen. That's not a suggestion, Celeste. Eudora got up. Her legs held this time. The stairwell between the fourth floor and the third was empty and cold and smelled of concrete, and she sat down on the landing where she'd sat once before, 11 steps down, 11 back up, and she put her back against the cinder block. The phone sat in both her hands like something that might go off. Not the house. Priya said it. Diane said it. She knew it. She had one number that wasn't the house. One person in 8 months she'd called instead of texted, exactly once, the night everything got real. The night she'd made him promise, "You tell me what you find, don't decide what I can hear." The night he'd taken a pause a little too long before he said, "I'll tell you what I find." Her thumb found the name. She pressed it before the nurse in her could talk the daughter out of it, and she brought it to her ear, and it rang once, and the tears came all the way up now, everything she'd damned in the ward breaking loose the second she didn't have a patient to be steady for. He answered on the first ring, the way he always did. "I'm here," Junsuk said. And Eudora, alone in a stairwell with her father in the ground and her mother's lowercase voice in her hand, opened her mouth and said the worst true thing she had ever had to say to another human being. "My dad's dead." It came apart in her mouth. Junsuk. She buried him. She buried my father yesterday, and I wasn't there, and I don't even get to know if it's real. I can't call the house. I can't, please. Her voice dropped to almost nothing, the smallest she'd ever made it. Tell me what to do. I don't know what to do. There was a silence on the line. Not the silence of a man who didn't know what to say. The silence of a man who had known, for days, exactly what she was about to feel, who had sat with the whole newspaper's worth of it folded in his chest, in public, saying nothing, waiting for a mother to press send, and she had. "Don't say anything," Junsuk said. "Just watch your phone." Eudora pressed her wet cheek harder against the stairwell wall. "What? I'm sending you something, right now. Look at it before you say another word." Her thumb shook against the glass. The screen dimmed, then a small square bloomed in the corner. A video request, his name on it. She almost dropped the phone answering it. The image came up sideways, then righted itself, and her mind refused it for a full second before it broke through. A park, 4 benches, a dry fountain, and her father, Elijah, on the second bench, in the brown corduroy jacket she'd bought him 3 winters ago, folding a newspaper into quarters the way he always did. Alive, breathing, his wire-frame glasses catching the morning. A man in a charcoal suit sat 1 arm's length away, and the koi on his neck told her whose eyes she was borrowing. "That's," her voice cracked in half, "that's live? Recorded. Thursday morning. But he's home right now, Eudora. He's fine. He was fine yesterday. He was fine when she typed that message to you." The stairwell tilted. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the landing again, the phone clutched in both hands, watching her dead father turn a page. "He's not buried," she said, testing the words like a fresh suture. "He's not. She didn't. Nobody died. There was never a funeral. There was never a body. And here is where the grief in her chest did something Rochelle had never planned for. It didn't dissolve into relief. It went cold. It hardened into a shape with edges. She watched Elijah lift his face to say something to the stranger beside him, watched him smile, her father, who smiled maybe 4 times a year, and the tears drying on her jaw stopped being about loss and started being about the 22 years of it. She priced a funeral, Junsuk said. Quiet, level. She searched how to tell a nurse on shift that her father died. For 2 weeks. She built this the way you'd build anything you meant to use. You knew, not a question. The line held. 1 breath, 2. For days, he said. She closed her eyes, opened them. Her father was still there, still turning the page, oblivious in the little square of light. You watched me get that message tonight, knowing it was a lie. No. His voice didn't rise, but something under it pulled taut. I watched you get it about 90 seconds after I did. She pressed send, and I was still deciding whether to call you. If I'd called you yesterday with a theory, a browser history, a funeral pamphlet in her recycling, I'd have handed you the same thing she hands you. A story about your family you couldn't check. I wasn't going to be one more voice telling you what was true about the people you love. I needed her to move first, so I could put the lie in one of your hands and your father's face in the other, at the same time. Eudora looked at the man on the bench beside her father. The stranger she now understood had been sitting with Elijah while she grieved him. That was you, she said. On the bench, you went to him. I sat next to him. I told him nothing. He talked about you the whole time. A pause. He folds the paper for you. He said your hands are steady, not your mother's. Something came apart in her chest, and she pressed the heel of her hand to her mouth to keep it from getting out into the stairwell, where the whole fourth floor could hear. She watched the little square until it ended. Then she started it again, her father lifting the paper, her father saying something she couldn't hear, her father laughing at whatever the stranger said back. She did the thing she did with a hard vein, pressed until she was sure of it, and every time she pressed, he was still alive. Say it again, she said. Say what? That he was fine when she typed it. He was fine when she typed it. He's fine now. He's home in his chair. She fed him lunch an hour ago, and then she sat down and told you he was in the ground. Junsuk's voice went flat. In a way she was learning meant he was holding something down. She didn't grieve a man. She used a living one. Eudora wiped her jaw with the back of her hand. The grief was still there, but it had changed jobs. It wasn't mourning anymore. It was evidence. I believed it, she said. For an hour I believed my father was dead, and I wasn't there, and it was my fault. She built that hour on purpose. She sat at that table and drew it up like a floor plan. Yes. And you sat on it for days so you wouldn't do the same thing to me. The line held. I almost did anyway, he said. Sitting on the truth is a cousin of telling a lie. I know that now. I'm not going to pretend the closed doors were free. She didn't go home that night, and she didn't go to her mother's, and those were the two roads Rochelle had spent a lifetime paving. Diane found her still in the stairwell 20 minutes later, took one look, and put a hand under her elbow. You're not driving, Diane said, and you're not on my floor another minute tonight. Priya drove. Eudora sat in the passenger seat of the little hatchback, with her phone face up on her thigh. The video watched and rewatched, until she'd memorized the exact moment her father laughed. Priya kept both hands on the wheel and her jaw tight, and at a red light she finally said it. When I read that message, something felt wrong. In here. She touched her own sternum. A buried father is a phone call from a hospital, a coroner, a cousin. It's not two texts in lowercase from the woman who cried wolf about a heart attack last month. She exhaled. I didn't say it because you were on the floor. I'm sorry I didn't say it. You told me not to call the house, Eudora said. That was the right thing. That was the only thing I had. The teal scrubs were still on under Priya's denim jacket. She'd covered 4 beds and Eudora's grief in the same shift, and she pulled into the lot of her building, running on the fumes of both. Inside, the couch had a folded blanket on the arm and a stack of thin gold bangles on the side table, and Priya pointed at all of it like a landlord showing a lease. That's yours as long as you want it. There's no version of tonight where you sleep alone. Eudora sat. She looked at her phone. The old voicemail was still there, the one from that first night, unopened for going on 2 weeks, carried like a stone she couldn't put down. She'd told herself it was a rehearsal. She pressed it now, finally, in the low light of Priya's living room. Her mother's voice, calm, almost gentle. "Baby, I know you think I lie, but one day it won't be a lie, and you'll have spent all your no's, and there'll be nothing left to say yes with. Come home before that day. Come home so you learn what it costs." Eudora set the phone face down on the cushion. She didn't shake. She'd spent 2 weeks afraid of what was in that message, and it turned out to be the same 3 notes played on a different string. A woman practicing a death to teach a lesson. She'd finally heard the whole song, and it had no power left in it. "She wanted me to hear that after she'd told me he was in the ground," Eudora said. "So it would sound like prophecy." Priya sat on the arm of the couch. "What do you want to do?" "Nothing. Tonight." Eudora pulled the blanket over her knees. "Tomorrow I go back to work. She doesn't get my job. She was never going to get my job." He offered her the house 2 days later. He said it plainly, on the phone, at night, because night was the only time he called now, and he'd started doing that without being asked, as if he'd read the shape of her boundary before she'd drawn it. "There's a place. Quiet, gated, nobody reaches you there. Staff. You'd never have to lock a door yourself again." "No," she said. He didn't push. That was the thing she kept turning over afterward. A man who could put a fence around a life, and when she said no, the no simply held. "Then I stop offering," he said. "Priya's couch it is." It's not the couch. She was in the dark of Priya's living room, phone to her ear, the city humming outside. "If I move into a house you built, I've just traded one person, deciding where I'm safe for another. Even if you're right. Especially if you're right. I've been managed my whole life by someone who was sure they knew what I could survive. A beat. You closed doors on me. For days, you decided what I could hear." The line was quiet. She let it be quiet. "Yes," he said finally. "I did, and I told myself it was for you," which is the exact sentence she uses. "I heard it come out of my own head, and it scared me." Another pause. "I won't do it again. If I know a thing, you know the thing. Even if it's ugly. Even if it makes you hate me for an hour." "Then here's the thing you know now," she said. "I'm staying at Priya's. You call at night. You don't send men to sit near me. And when I go back to that house, because I am going, once, on my own feet, you don't come with me." "Once," he repeated, "on your own feet. Once." She went on a Sunday, in the afternoon, uniform still on from a half shift, because she wanted to be exactly who she was when she walked through the door. A nurse with steady hands, not a daughter coming home. The house smelled the way it always had, lavender and old carpet. Rochelle was at the kitchen table with her reading glasses on the beaded chain, and when she saw Eudora, her whole face reorganized itself into the warm one, the audience one. "Baby," she rose. "You came. I knew you'd come. I knew once you understood. Where's Dad?" "Eudora, where is he?" "He's resting." The warmth flickered. "He's not well, you know that. He's not well." Eudora walked past her to the living room. Elijah was in his chair, newspaper folded into quarters, glasses catching the lamp. He looked up, and his tired face opened like a window. "There she is," he said. Eudora crossed the room and put her hand on his shoulder, and felt him solid and warm and breathing under her palm, and she held it there a long moment before she turned around. Rochelle stood in the doorway with the cardigan clutched around her, and the warm face was gone now, and what replaced it came fast. "You've been talking to that man, the Korean one. You think I don't know what he is? You think I didn't look?" She held up her phone, the screen bright with something. "Han Jun-suk. You know what comes up next to that name? You want your father to know? You want your hospital to know what kind of man his daughter, Diane, knows," Eudora said. Rochelle stopped. Everything you did, she wrote down. The call you made saying I was unstable, the message saying my father was buried, the times, the words. There's a folder now, Mama, with your name on it, and it's not the kind you wanted. You tried to make me look dangerous at my job. Eudora's voice stayed level, which was somehow worse than shouting. You made yourself a case file instead. I am your mother. You buried him in a text message, so I'd come running. Eudora's hand was still on Elijah's shoulder. He's sitting right here. Rochelle's chin trembled and the tears came, and Eudora recognized them, the way you recognize a song from two notes. The audience tears, the ones with a hand already reaching for whoever was watching. But there was no one watching. There was a daughter and a husband and a lamp. You don't understand what it is, Rochelle said, to give your life to a girl who leaves. I did everything. I gave you everything, and you'd rather live on some other woman's couch than sleep under my roof. You didn't give me everything, Mama. You gave me nothing to hold and called it love, and every time I found something anyway, you told the world I was unstable until they let go of my hand. Eudora kept her voice down, and the keeping it down cost her something, and she paid it. The landlord, every man I ever brought near. My job. You'd have taken my job, the one clean thing I built with my own two hands. To protect you. From what? From being loved by anybody but you? And that's when the newspaper came down. Elijah folded it, quarters, the way his father taught him, the way he'd taught a stranger on a park bench, and set it on the arm of the chair and stood up. He stood up slow, the way he did everything, but he stood all the way up, and Rochelle looked at him like a piece of furniture had spoken. Rochelle. His voice was quiet and rough, and it filled the room anyway. I let you make me small, because I thought small was peaceful. I was wrong. It just made me quiet enough that you could use my silence for a coffin. He looked at his daughter. You don't do that to my girl. You buried me to hurt her. I've been sitting in this chair pretending I couldn't see it. I saw it. Elijah. She has steady hands. He said it to Rochelle, but his eyes were on Eudora. She got those from being afraid in this house, and holding them still anyway. Not from you. She doesn't owe this house another minute. The kitchen clock ticked into the silence. Rochelle's mouth worked and nothing came, because for the first time in the history of that house, the audience had turned around. Eudora squeezed her father's shoulder. Come see me, she said to him. Any Sunday. You know where the hospital is. She made sure of that. A flicker, almost a smile. You come in the front. She walked to the door. She didn't slam it. She didn't cry. She set the boundary down like a clean instrument on a tray, and she let herself out, and behind her she heard her father say, low, sit down, Rochelle. We're going to talk. For once you're going to listen. Weeks passed, the way weeks do. Plainly, without a single collapse in any of them. Diane's folder became a protocol. The hospital wrote a policy with a dull administrative name about verifying family emergencies reported by third parties, and every nurse on the cardiac floor got an email about it, and none of them knew it had a face. Eudora knew. She read it at the med station one morning, counting a dose. 1, 2, 3. Signing her name after, and she thought, she reached for my hands and I kept them steady, and now there's a rule. Diane stopped her in the corridor that same week. No clipboard. She looked at Eudora over the rimless glasses for a moment longer than an administrator needed to. I told you once we hire quiet excellence, she said. I want to correct the record. Quiet isn't the part I meant. Steady is. She turned and walked on, low heels clicking, and that was the whole conversation, and it was enough. Sakonsok called at night. He never sent a man to a park again. Some Sundays she took his call from Priya's little balcony and told him about her father, who'd started coming to the hospital cafeteria on Sunday afternoons in a beige cardigan over a checked shirt, folding a newspaper into quarters, sometimes bringing a second cup of coffee because, he admitted once, embarrassed, a man he'd met on a bench might stop by, and he liked the company. On one of those Sunday afternoons, the man from the bench did stop by. Eudora watched it happen from across the cafeteria on her break, her father in the beige cardigan, and Jun-suk in a black knit sweater, the tailored suit left somewhere else, 2 coffees between them and a folded newspaper. Elijah was talking with his hands, which he never did, and Jun-suk was listening the way he listened to her, and when her father laughed, the sound carried over the tables. Neither of them called it anything. Elijah just introduced him as the fella from the park, and Jun-suk let him, and Eudora understood that her father had chosen not to ask the same question about a name that comes up next to a name, because he'd already decided the answer with his own eyes. A man who sat with a lonely stranger on a bench and told him nothing but kindness was a man he'd let near his girl. She moved into her own place eventually, not a gated house with staff, a 1-bedroom with a lock she turned herself. Priya helped her carry boxes up 2 flights and complained about it the whole way and hugged her hard at the top. "The couch misses you," she said. "It does not miss you. I'm burning the blanket." And then, quieter, at the door, "You did it clean." "I watched you do it clean. Your mother threw everything she had, and you didn't throw anything back. You just stopped catching it." She came in from a shift on a Thursday, blue uniform, curls half loose from the tie, the tired that lives in your feet after 12 hours. She dropped her bag on the counter and took out her phone. 2 things waited on it. A text from her father, "Watched the game, folded the sports page for you, come get it Sunday, love, Dad." Steady, ordinary, his. And from her mother, nothing. No all-caps emergency, no lowercase burial, no voice practicing a grief it hadn't earned, just silence, for the first time in 24 years, because the silence was finally hers to give back. Eudora read her father's message twice. She set the phone face up on the counter this time, not face down, because there was nothing on it she needed to hide from anymore. Somewhere across the city, a man she trusted was waiting for the night to call. Somewhere her father was folding a sports page. And somewhere her mother sat in a lavender kitchen with an audience of exactly one, herself, and a folder with her name on it. Eudora poured a glass of water. Her hands were steady. They'd always been steady. She just hadn't known whose they were. The phone lit up one more time. Her father again. "He's real, isn't he? The bench fella. You can tell me when it's real." She looked at it a long moment. Then she typed back one word, and she smiled when she sent it, because for the first time in her life, a message about her family was true. Yes. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Tell me, K-Fam, have you ever poured your whole heart into caring for others, the way Eudora cared for every patient, while someone who shared your blood was quietly plotting to break you? Have you ever grieved a lie, and only found your freedom the moment you stopped answering the calls? Mark my words, K-Fam, the truth always folds itself open like that newspaper on the bench. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, truth, and family, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.